Housing supply and unaffordability has been a massive challenge that all levels of government have been trying to beat for quite some time. However, the provincial government in Ontario has taken a very different approach in giving mayors of mid to large cities more powers. These strong mayor powers, or also known as executive mayor powers, give the mayor more ability to move forward on items that specifically target housing. For example, being able to pass more bylaws that help build more housing without the full support of council. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, these moves have been extremely controversial, with some calling it undemocratic, and also some people saying they don't go far enough. To talk about this, I'm excited to be joined by the Mayor of Kitchener, Berry Vrbanovic, who recently received these powers back in June. Hope you enjoy our conversation now.
We're talking about strong mayor powers. First of all, do you want to just explain that for us? What are strong mayor powers?
Sure. So this is something that has typically not existed in Canada, but it is much more common in other parts of the world, particularly in the United States and Europe and other areas. And it's where mayors have certain powers to do certain things without requiring the full support of council. And sometimes they're also referred to as executive powers, where a mayor has certain budgetary discretion, certain decision-making authority on their own. This is certainly common in a lot of larger cities in the United States. I think of Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, all those places, but also in cities in Europe. And it's very different than what the typical model in Canada has been, which has been a council-based system. And so in that council-based system, the mayor is really just one vote like anyone else. Sure, there's certain powers of persuasion that come by virtue of, being the mayor and the respect that the office has. But at the end of the day, it comes down to your one vote, in our case, one vote out of 11, right? And so, I think when the province introduced the strong mayor's powers, I think, part of it came from Premier Ford's experience. Their family has a company business that existed both in Toronto as well as Chicago. And so they got used to, or got familiar with those in the United States. They obviously were involved, their father was involved provincially. They were involved in local government, and I think they saw some value in it. What I've said since the beginning, since they were introduced, we've always operated on a collaborative kind of system in Canada, and certainly in the city of Kitchener. And so, as I think back to my 8.5 years on council, I would have been hard pressed to think of a time when I would have used those strong mayor powers. Now that they're there, what I've said is, my focus is going to be to continue working collaboratively with our council and with our senior administration, as we have in the past. There's some things that, according to the new legislation, we have to do, like the annual budget becomes something that's presented by the mayor. So that's something, that we're going to have to do going forward. But I think councils achieve more when we work collaboratively together, and you get the best of ideas, from everyone, that ultimately, I think, make better decisions.
So does that mean you're not going to use any of these voluntary powers?
So again, I mean, listen, like I say, I can't think of a time in the last 8.5 years when I would have used them. I certainly have no intention of using them now. I mean, my plans are that, in terms of the civic administration, those things are going to be delegated to our CAO. The roles around, council committees and so on are going to be delegated to council. In terms of, can I say never? I can't say never. Never is a long time, but I really have no intention of going that route. It hasn't been my style. I've even gone as far as saying, like, not only can I think of a time in my 8.5 years of being mayor when I would have used them, I'd be hard pressed to think of a time in Carl's 17 years where he might have used them, because it's just not the way we've worked as a council, and so it's not part of our corporate culture.
How do you think that this impacts young people? Do you think that these powers could be used to help um, make progress on issues that affect uh, young people across Ontario?
So the reason the province introduced them was because, I mean, there are some councils, whether in Ontario or elsewhere in the country, where councils at times have been dysfunctional, and so decisions that maybe should be really considered and move forward because of NIMBYism or whatever don't get made, and so you know the province has been very clear is that these powers can only be used in relation to issues around housing, right? And provincial priorities. So housing, economic development, and so on. So it's not like you can use them on everything if you were going to use them. And where I think they can be helpful is if you have councils that don't get that we have a housing supply shortage in this province and in this country, and if we want to be able to keep young talent, if we want to be able to attract young talent, you want affordable places where you can live, whether you rent them or ultimately own them or whatever. And so if they could potentially be helpful in terms of dealing with those things. But again, my advice, and I work with a lot of local governments because I sit on a global board of local governments, and I've been past president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. My advice to any mayor is focus on building, collaboration amongst your council and building a shared vision and moving forward with that. That's how you're going to achieve the best success as a community. And we've been fortunate as a city to be able to do that.
Do you think, though, if we take a step back and we pretend like the strong mayors don't exist, pretend like not doesn't, and we go back to what you had 6 months ago, do you think that mayors should have more powers than basically a little bit of responsibility over city administration and kind of chair of council, if I'm understanding what the role kind of used to be?
Yeah. So what I would say to you is, listen, as mayor, you've been elected by the whole city, right? Unlike individual ward councillors that are elected in their wards. And you've been typically elected because you've articulated some sort of vision around where you want the community to go and how you're going to do that. And so I think it can arguably it can be helpful to be able to have some tools that allow you to move some of that work forward. But again, my experience has been, and I can only speak to my own individual set of circumstances. My set of circumstances has been such that we haven't had to use that, and we've been able to move these issues forward in a productive way.
Could you see the potential with these powers now, though, that let's say there was a really controversial decision, there's like a vote very close to kind of half, it's budget related, we'll say. Could you see a scenario in which these powers could be used to like divide council even more? Because then you'd have, oh, well, the mayor's just overreaching and whatever. Do you think that could create a negative impact on the collaborative process? If
For
the mayor
sure.
if the mayor can just say, we're doing this.
For sure, and that's why why the focus has been around collaborative approaches and so on, and so it's I think the collaboration really is the key going forward.
If you had one suggestion for the province, you were going to revise these strong mayor powers, what's your one thing you think should be changed about this program?
Listen, they've only been in place for 3 weeks. I mean, most of us are on summer break from council meetings, so we haven't have had any meetings where you would even consider using them. What I would tell you is, the one thing that I feel quite strongly about is I do worry that it could lead to the politicization of the civic administration. I think one of the strengths of council and of local government in Canada has been that we don't have party politics in it, number one, and number two, that we have a professional public service whose role is not to be loyal to the mayor or any member of council or whatever, but to give us their best professional advice, whether it's as a planner or from a financial perspective or an engineering perspective or whatever the circumstances are, so that council can take in all of the information from those professionals, take into account the input from the community, and ultimately hopefully make the best possible decisions. And so I do worry a little bit that if you get into an environment like you see in some strong mayor communities in the States, where as soon as you get a new mayor, the whole senior administration leaves and a new senior administration comes, you lose some of that continuity. And I worry that maybe you don't always get the best professional advice, but that it becomes somewhat politicized, right?
Berry Vrbanovic, thanks so much for coming on Political Debrief.
Thanks a million, Joshua. This has been great, and good luck as you continue your podcast.
And that's it for this episode of Political Debrief. Thank you so much for watching. If you want, I would invite you to check out the full interview with Mayor Vrbanovic on the podcast version of the site. We talked about his first 100 days in mayor and why he became a mayor in the first place. I'd invite you to check that out. As always, I invite you to subscribe on YouTube, down below, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow me on Twitter/X at Josh Oliverio, and Threads, Instagram at Josh_Oliverio. Those links are all down below. Also, leave a comment on the website or on YouTube. It means a lot. If you want to take a couple minutes to share your thoughts, positive or negative, I appreciate it. That's it for this episode. See you in a couple weeks.